Before we begin this heartwarming story, please tell us in the comments box, where are you watching from? We love to hear from you. Jessica Walker, at only 22, was filled with the kind of dreams that many young people have. She dreamed of going to college, traveling the world, and finding a kind, loving partner. She had a kind heart that shone through in everything she did. Her laughter was light, her smile bright enough to light up any room. But all that had changed ever since her father married her stepmother. Her stepmother was cold, ruthless, and driven by greed. The woman saw Jessica not as a daughter but as a burden, something to be pushed aside and controlled. With each passing day, Jessica's life grew darker. There was no room for joy in her stepmother's house. Jessica was forbidden from studying, from pursuing a career, or even speaking to anyone outside. She became a ghost in her own home, silently moving through the days as her dreams slowly withered. Her stepmother kept her isolated. Whenever Jessica tried to fight back, her stepmother would call her lazy, ungrateful, and remind her that she had no family left, no real purpose. "You should be lucky to have a roof over your head," she would snap, her words always sharp like daggers, piercing Jessica's heart. On one particular afternoon, everything would change. Jessica was sitting in her small room, reading a book, trying to escape into a world where she was free. But then the door to her room creaked open. She looked up and saw her stepmother standing there, dressed in a gown that shimmered, her eyes glinting with something cold. A smile that didn't reach her eyes played on her lips. "Jessica," her stepmother called, her voice far too cheerful for the moment. "Come to the living room. I need to speak with you." Confused and nervous, Jessica stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to expect. Her stepmother's mood was always unpredictable. Jessica followed her down the hallway, her footsteps soft, yet heavy with dread. As they entered the living room, Jessica noticed a tall, black luxury car parked outside, its engine humming quietly. The sight of it sent a cold shiver down her spine. Her stepmother turned to her expression suddenly colder. "There's a man waiting for you outside," she said, her voice oddly calm, almost too calm. "He's rich, 60 years old. You're going with him." Jessica's heart stopped. She felt a sudden tightness in her chest, her breath catching in her throat. "What? What do you mean?" she stammered, unable to grasp what was happening. Her stepmother's face twisted into something dark, something almost sinister. "I sold you," she whispered, her voice low and venomous. "You're going to be his wife now. He paid me." The words hit Jessica like a punch to the gut. She stumbled back, trying to process what her stepmother had just said. Sold? To a man she didn't know? A man who was old enough to be her grandfather? A shudder ran down her spine as her mind raced. She felt her legs give way, and she collapsed onto the nearest chair. Her head spun. This couldn't be real. Her world was already crumbling, but now it was breaking into pieces she could never fix. Her stepmother stood there watching her expression cold and emotionless. "No, no, this isn't real," Jessica whispered, shaking her head. "You can't do this. I'm not yours to sell." Her stepmother's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a cruel smirk. "I can do whatever I want with you. You're nothing. No one will miss you." Jessica's throat tightened, her body trembling. She wanted to scream, to fight, to escape, but she was paralyzed. She had no family left. No one cared about her. Her father's death had left her with nothing but this woman, this cruel woman who had never loved her, never wanted her. Her stepmother's words echoed in her mind, drowning out all other thoughts. "He's waiting for you, Jessica. Don't make him wait." There was nothing she could do, no way out. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she walked toward the door. Outside, the black luxury car waited, its tinted windows hiding the man who had bought her, whose life she was now bound to. The heavy scent of the leather seats inside the car made her stomach turn. She had no choice but to get in. Her stepmother gave her one last cold look before shutting the door behind her. As Jessica climbed into the back of the car, the driver gave her no greeting. He just started the car, pulling away from the house. Her stepmother's laughter echoed in her mind. What had she done to deserve this? Why was her life so broken? She sat in silence, her mind a whirl of fear, disbelief, and a growing sense of despair. The road stretched out before her, endless, dark, and filled with uncertainty. Was this her life now? Was this what the rest of her years would look like? As the car sped off into the unknown, Jessica's heart was heavy with the weight of a future she never chose. She had no idea who the man was or what awaited her. The only thing she could hold on to was the small, fragile hope that somewhere in this world, there might still be a chance for her to escape before it was too late. Her life was now in the hands of a stranger. But little did she know this was only the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. A story that no one would ever expect. The black car rolled to a stop in front of something Jessica had never seen before. A house so large and grand, it looked like it had been stolen from a fairy tale. Towering pillars held up its gleaming front porch. Golden doors shone in the sunlight like treasure. Crystal windows sparkled like stars, and every inch of the mansion whispered wealth. But Jessica didn't feel awe. She felt fear. Her hands trembled in her lap. Her throat was dry. She was stepping into the unknown, into a world where she didn't belong. Her stepmother's cruel words echoed in her ears. "You're his wife now. He paid for you." The driver stepped out silently and opened the car door for her. Jessica hesitated. Her legs didn't want to move. Her mind screamed to run. But where would she go? She had no home, no family, no money. So she stepped out into the warm air and followed the driver up the marble steps. The door opened before they reached it. A man stood there, tall, dignified. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished. His hair was silver gray, combed neatly back. He looked powerful, but not dangerous. Jessica met his eyes and froze. They weren't cruel. They weren't hungry or cold like she feared. They were tired, deep, quiet eyes that carried years of loneliness. They looked straight into her soul and broke her heart. He didn't smile. He didn't reach for her. He simply said, in a quiet voice that made the world stop, "You can leave any time." Jessica's lips parted. Her breath caught. "I didn't buy you," the man said again, softer now. "I paid your stepmother to get you away from her. That's all." Jessica blinked fast, her heart pounding. Her thoughts raced. "Then, why bring me here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man stepped aside to let her in. She stood still, unsure until he nodded. "I just wanted someone to talk to," he said. "Someone who wouldn't lie to me. Someone real." Jessica stepped inside slowly, not knowing what to expect. The house was quiet. It smelled of lavender and old books. The marble floors echoed under her feet. Everything around her screamed wealth, but the silence screamed something else. Loneliness. "I'm Mick Smith," he said as he closed the door gently behind her. "You can call me Mick." Jessica didn't reply. She didn't know what to say. Her mind was spinning. Mick didn't ask her to change. He didn't grab her arm or tell her where to sleep. Instead, he led her through the mansion with slow, careful steps. "This house is too big for one man," he said. "I have more rooms than I'll ever use. You can have whichever one you like." He opened the door to a guest room. It was beautiful. Light blue walls, a large soft bed, a bookshelf filled with stories, a window that let in golden light. Clothes, fresh and folded, already sat waiting for her in the closet. The room smelled like vanilla and hope. "I had the staff prepare it just in case you stayed," Mick said gently. "You don't have to. You're free." Jessica looked at him, still unsure. He left her alone. No questions, no pressure, no demands. That night, she sat on the edge of the bed for hours, not moving. Her heart was confused, her body tense. She didn't cry, not because she wasn't hurt, but because she was numb. Mick didn't come to her room. He didn't knock. The house remained quiet. The next morning when she came out, there was breakfast on the table. Warm pancakes, orange juice, a vase of fresh daisies. "Eat what you like," Mick said from across the room, reading a newspaper. "I'll be in the garden." Jessica watched him disappear through the glass doors into a space filled with roses and tall trees. He walked slowly, his shoulders a little slouched, his hands behind his back, like a man who'd lost something long ago and never found it again. Day by day, she began to observe him more. He ate alone. He walked alone. He spent hours in the garden or library, barely speaking unless spoken to. He gave her everything she needed, clothes, meals, books to read, even a journal, but never touched her, never ordered her, never looked at her the way other men might have. Still, Jessica didn't trust easily. How could she? Her life had been built on betrayal. Her own blood sold her for money. How could she believe a stranger's kindness? She kept to herself, quiet and watchful. But one evening changed something. Jessica wandered into the library to find a book. She didn't expect Mick to be there. He sat in a leather chair, a photo in his hand. He didn't notice her. Curious, she stepped closer. The photo was of a young woman, beautiful, smiling, holding a baby. Tears rolled down Mick's cheek before he could hide them. Jessica froze. For the first time, she saw not a millionaire, but a man broken by the past. He quickly wiped his face when he saw her. "I'm sorry," he said. "Didn't mean to." "You lost someone," Jessica said quietly. Mick nodded. "My wife and my son. Long ago." Her heart cracked. Suddenly, the walls between them didn't feel so thick. They sat in silence for a long time, the kind of silence that connects hearts instead of separating them. From that moment, something shifted. Jessica started noticing the way Mick listened when she spoke, even when she just mentioned books. She noticed how he never asked for anything, only offered. How he said thank you for even the smallest kindness. He never once tried to make her feel owned, only safe. She still didn't trust the world, but for the first time, she thought maybe, just maybe, not everyone was cruel. Maybe this man with sad eyes was different. Maybe he was broken, just like her. And maybe, just maybe, they were meant to help each other heal. Jessica walked through the mansion like a ghost, present but silent. Days passed like pages in a forgotten book. The pain in her heart still burned, but quietly now, like an old wound. She expected Mick to change, to turn cold, to demand something, to show his true face. But he didn't. Instead, he treated her like something fragile and precious, like glass that had already been cracked. He never entered her room, never asked where she went or what she did. But every morning, a small act of kindness waited. One day, a note appeared outside her door. Just 4 words. "Hope you slept well." Another day, there was a cup of her favorite jasmine tea, still warm, left near the window where she liked to sit. No name, no explanation. She began to notice him watching her from a distance, not with hunger or suspicion, but with a kind of silent protectiveness, like a man guarding something sacred. Sometimes when she hummed to herself without realizing it, she'd hear a soft chuckle from the hallway. When she looked, Mick would be there, holding a book or cup of tea, smiling faintly. It confused her. Men in her past had only wanted, they only took. But this man gave. Jessica couldn't sleep one night. The moonlight spilled through her window like a silver river, and the silence of the mansion grew louder with each breath she took. Something stirred inside her, a need to understand him, to understand why he chose her, when he could have had anyone, or no one at all. Barefoot and quiet, she slipped out of her room. The house was filled with long shadows and ancient whispers. Her fingers brushed along the walls as she walked. She passed golden frames holding photos of younger versions of Mick, standing beside a beautiful woman with soft eyes and a wide smile. In many of the pictures, they were holding a child, a baby boy. Jessica paused. She had never asked Mick about his past. He never offered. A strange pull tugged at her heart. At the end of a quiet hallway, behind a heavy velvet curtain, she noticed a door that didn't match the rest of the house. It was old, wooden, and nearly forgotten. She slowly pulled the curtain aside. Her hand touched the knob. It creaked open. The room inside was dark, but moonlight crept through the window, falling on something that stopped Jessica's breath. A grand piano, covered in dust, unplayed for years. Its white keys had turned slightly yellow, and a single faded rose sat on top. She stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. She sat on the bench and touched one key. It made a soft sound, sad and hollow. Then a voice behind her broke the silence. "That was hers," Mick said quietly. Jessica jumped, turning to face him. My wife loved to play, he continued, stepping into the room like a man entering a memory. She played every morning. The sound of her music filled this house with life. Jessica stood, unsure if she should speak, but the sorrow in his voice wrapped around her heart like vines. She died, she asked gently. He nodded. 20 years ago, a car accident. She and our son were taken from me in seconds. Jessica's chest ached. She couldn't imagine that kind of loss. The pain in his voice was raw, like it had happened yesterday. I closed this room the day they died, Mick continued. I couldn't bear to hear silence where music used to live. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. But why me? She asked. Her voice cracked. You could have saved any girl. Why bring me here? Mick looked down, then slowly met her gaze. His voice was steady but soft. Because I saw something in your eyes that day. Pain, fear, but also hope. You were just like me. Lost, unwanted, judged. He stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. The world looks at me, he said, and sees a rich old man. They think I want something from a girl like you. That I must be using you. Jessica swallowed hard. The world would say that. They had said that. But I didn't save you to own you, Mick whispered. I saved you because I wanted to protect someone who still had light left inside them. Because no one protected me when I needed it. And because maybe I thought we could both heal. Together. Jessica's lips trembled. No one had ever said words like that to her. No one had ever looked at her as something worth protecting, not even her own family. She looked at the piano again. Her fingers hovered over the keys. I used to play, she said. Mick raised an eyebrow. My mom taught me when I was little, Jessica added. Before she passed. I stopped after that. It hurt too much. Silence hung between them, deep in understanding. I think, Mick said slowly, some things need to hurt before they can heal. Jessica sat on the bench once more. Her fingers pressed a few gentle notes. It was rusty, imperfect, but soft. Mick sat down across the room, listening like he was hearing his wife's voice again. That night something changed forever. Not with words, not with gifts, but with music. Jessica played until her fingers trembled, and Mick listened like the house had come back to life. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a guest, and he didn't feel alone. The clock struck midnight. Jessica lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The world was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. Memories, fears, and a strange warmth that had started blooming in her heart since that night in the piano room. She rose silently and stepped out onto the marble floor, the cold biting at her bare feet. She wrapped herself in a shawl and wandered toward the garden, a place she hadn't yet explored at night. As she opened the glass doors, a cool breeze kissed her skin. The garden was like a dream under the moonlight. Roses shimmered like silver, and the grass danced with shadows. She took slow steps down the stone path, letting the quietness of nature wrap around her. Then she saw him, Mick, sitting alone on a wooden bench beneath a blooming cherry tree. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored suit, just a sweater and old slacks. He looked softer, human, real. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and their eyes met. I couldn't sleep, she said, almost whispering. He smiled faintly. Me neither. The nights are the loudest, aren't they? Jessica nodded and slowly walked over. She sat beside him, careful not to disturb the peace. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was filled with the soft chirping of crickets and the distant rustle of leaves. Then Jessica broke the silence. Do you believe in second chances? Mick turned his head toward the sky. I believe in souls, he said softly. And some souls feel familiar, like they've met before, even if life keeps them apart. Jessica turned to look at him. His face was lit by the moon, and for the first time she noticed something new in his eyes. Not just sadness, but longing. Your soul, he said, feels like someone I waited for, without even knowing I was waiting. Jessica felt her breath hitch in her chest. They sat there for what felt like hours, speaking in soft voices that melted into the night. She told him about her childhood, The nights she cried into her pillow, the days she dreamed of escaping. He listened. He told her about the years he spent building his empire, the sacrifices he made, and how none of it filled the silence left after losing his wife and child. They say time heals, he whispered, but some losses become a part of you, like bones. Jessica touched her own chest. And some emptiness feels so normal. You forget it hurts. He looked at her. That's why I brought you here. Not because I needed someone beautiful, but because I needed someone real. She blinked back tears. And yet, Mick added with a bitter smile, people still talk. My business partners whisper. They think I'm chasing youth, lust. They call me foolish, creepy, even cruel. Jessica felt a surge of anger. That's because they only see your age. They don't see your heart. He tilted his head. And you? What do you see? She didn't speak right away. Instead, she reached out and gently took his hand in hers. His skin was warm. His fingers trembled slightly. I see a good man, she said. A man who gave me a room when I had no home, a voice when I had none, a name when mine was sold. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightened. I see someone who listens when no one else did, she continued, who waits without asking, who never crossed the line. And I see someone who's been judged unfairly, just like me. A long pause followed. The wind blew gently, and a few petals from the cherry blossoms floated down like whispers from the stars. When Mick opened his eyes, they shimmered, not from the moonlight, but from the tears he fought to hide. No one's ever said that to me, he admitted. Jessica smiled. Maybe no one ever looked close enough. Then, as if the night itself had conspired to hold that moment in time, silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of feelings that had no name. Jessica leaned her head gently on Mick's shoulder. She felt his breath hitch. He didn't move. Didn't dare ruin the moment. They didn't need a promise or a kiss, just presence and understanding. That night in the garden, everything changed. Not with grand gestures, but with truth. No amount of money, no mansion, no rumors could hide what had taken root between them. Something rare, something real. The sky was cloudy that morning. Soft gray clouds hung like thoughts, waiting to rain. Jessica sat at the edge of her bed, holding a letter in her trembling hands. It had arrived just an hour ago. A cream envelope. Her name written in blue ink. Inside was a job offer from a childhood friend she hadn't spoken to in years. It was a good opportunity. A fresh start in another state. A place where no one knew her past. She should have felt happy, but her heart was heavy. She looked around the room Mick had given her. The bookshelf he'd filled with stories. The small vase of flowers he changed every 3 days. The knitted blanket he left at the foot of her bed when the nights got cold. Everything in that room whispered, "You're not just a guest here." She walked slowly down the long hallway, letter still in hand. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of the fire crackling in the living room. Mick sat by the fireplace, a book in his lap, his glasses resting halfway down his nose. He looked up when she entered, and the warmth in his eyes made her pause. I got a job offer, she said, her voice low, uncertain. His expression didn't change. He simply closed the book and placed it on the table beside him. That's wonderful. Jessica nodded. It's in another state. It's everything I thought I wanted. A new beginning. Independence. But you're not happy, Mick said gently, his voice no louder than the fire behind him. She blinked, surprised. How do you know? He smiled softly. Because your eyes look like they did the day you came here. Lost. Jessica sat across from him, the letter resting on her lap now. She stared into the fire, its orange flames dancing like the feelings in her chest. I don't want to leave you, she finally said. Not because I owe you anything, not because I'm afraid, but because, she paused, swallowed hard, because I care. Mick's shoulders tensed, his lips parted slightly. A fragile silence fell between them. Then he whispered, I thought I'd never hear that again. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. You gave me a home when I had none, she said, her voice shaking. You gave me respect when the world tried to steal it from me. You listened when no one else ever did. You healed a part of me I thought was broken forever. Mick looked down at his hands. People have always seen me as a man with money and years. They never looked beyond that. I did, Jessica said, and I saw a heart braver than anyone's. He looked up, eyes shimmering. Jessica, she stood, walked toward him. You never forced me, never expected anything. You just waited. You showed me that love isn't loud or demanding. It's patient, gentle. She knelt beside his chair and took his hands in hers. That's when he said it. Jessica, Mick whispered, would you stay as my wife? The room went still. Jessica gasped. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the fire anymore. Mick, she whispered, are you sure? I mean, people will laugh. They'll talk. I'm 22. You're 60. They'll say I'm after your money or that you're wrong for loving me. He smiled, a smile full of pain and peace. They've always talked. Let them. People fear what they don't understand. What matters is what's between us, what we built, what we feel. Jessica's vision blurred with tears. You make me feel safe, she said. Seen, loved. He gently touched her face. You make me feel alive. And then she did something neither of them expected. She smiled through the tears and said, then yes, I'll stay, not as your guest, not as your debt, but as your wife. Mick let out a shaky breath, one he'd been holding for years without knowing. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, holding her like something precious, something irreplaceable. No noise from the outside world. No judgment. Just them, wrapped in warmth, in truth, and in a love that had defied every rule. The sun was soft that morning, as if even the sky knew this day was special. Jessica stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple white dress. Not designer, not expensive, but full of meaning. It was stitched by hand, thread by thread, by one of Mick's longtime staff members who said, you healed this house, Jessica. Now let me make something for your beginning. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from joy. Her hair was tied with white ribbons, and a tiny pendant around her neck carried a locket photo of her father. She whispered, I wish you were here. Outside, under the large oak tree in the garden, one that had stood for over 100 years, Mick waited. He wore a gray suit, classic and neat, with a white rose tucked near his heart. His hands were steady, but his eyes kept blinking away tears. There was no music, no photographers, no guests dressed in diamonds or tuxedos. Just the people who mattered. His staff, his cook, gardener, driver, stood nearby. Some held flowers, some held hands. All of them had tears in their eyes. Jessica walked down a path of white petals. The moment she stepped into the garden, Mick turned. And for a second, everything paused. The whispers of the past, the judgments, the cruel words, they all faded. All that remained was the sound of two hearts calling out in truth. Jessica reached him and smiled. Hi, Mick chuckled softly. You came. I promised, she said. They stood under the tree. A gentle breeze moved through the leaves like a blessing. A close friend officiated, a woman from Mick's charity team who believed in second chances and pure love. Do you, Mick, take Jessica, not as a symbol, not as a second chance, but as your heart's only truth? I do, he said, voice steady, eyes glistening. And do you, Jessica, take Mick, not as a debt to pay, not as a rescue, but as your home, your peace, your love? I do, she whispered, tears streaming freely. You may seal your promise. Mick leaned forward, gently touching her face. When their lips met, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks. It was peace. Deep, endless peace. Applause rang out. Not loud, but real. The staff clapped. One woman sobbed into her hands. Another whispered, finally. Someone saw him. Later that evening, they sat under the same tree, barefoot, sipping tea like they always had. No more hiding, Mick said softly. No more fear, Jessica replied. Months turned into years. Together they didn't chase luxury. They chased purpose. Jessica used her new life not to live in gold, but to give. She opened a small school in the heart of town. It was for girls like her, abandoned, silenced, forgotten. She named it the Willow House, after the tree she was married under. Mick stood proudly beside her on the first day. He donated books, food, uniforms. He shook every girl's hand and looked them in the eye as if they were daughters of kings. People noticed. First they whispered, "Did you hear? He married that young girl. She's just after his money. He's too old, she's too naive." But as time passed, the whispers changed. "Did you hear what they're doing for the girls? I heard she teaches art and poetry now. They actually seem happy." Eventually, those whispers turned into silence, and silence turned into respect. Because what Jessica and Mick had was not born from money or loneliness or desperation. It was born from kindness, patience, truth. They taught the world something most never learn. Love has no age, no color, no price. It grows where hearts are brave enough to listen. And under that old tree where petals still fell every spring, two souls, so different in years but identical in spirit, prove that the loudest love is often the quietest. A kind heart sees no skin, no age, no past, only love. In a world full of judgment, Jessica and Mick chose to love without limits, and that changed everything.